In the last decade or so, out of almost 3 million study permit applications received, Canada has refused almost 800,000 study permits. So roughly 1 in every 4 international student who gets admission in a Canadian educational institute is unable to study here as their study permit is refused. But this varies by country of citizenship of the applicant. Some countries have an approval rate of almost 100%, whereas others just 6%. And 6%, as you know, means that just 1 in 15 applicants will succeed in their study permit application. So why do applicants from certain countries have so many study permits refused? What can cause a study permit refusal? And what can you do to increase your chances of getting approved? Coming up in this video. If this is your first time, my name is Rashid Ali. I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant from Canada, and in this channel I share videos on Canadian immigration, visas and citizenship. None of the information shared in this channel is legal advice. If you need legal advice related to your case, book a consultation. I will put a link in the description. International students contribute to more than $20 billion annually to the Canadian economy. To put that into perspective, as per World Bank, for 2021, the annual GDP for Jamaica, Afghanistan, Armenia, Tajikistan, and a lot of other countries was less than $20 billion. So this is huge. Canada really benefits from international students that come here to study. Yet, Canada has refused a ton of study permits. So why is that? Here are top 10 countries with respect to study permit approval. As you can see, citizens of Japan and South Korea have enjoyed an amazing approval rate of 97% and 95%, which means almost everyone who is a citizen of Japan and Korea will have their study permit approved. Almost everyone. But on the other hand, here are the bottom 10 countries. Can you spot something that is common in all of these countries? I'll give you a second. As you might have noticed, with the exception of Afghanistan, all of the bottom 10 countries with the lowest study permit approval rates are African nations, and all of them, including Afghanistan, are developing nations. But there's more. I got GDP per capita data of all countries from World Bank and plotted it against the study permit approval rates. I then sent this data to a data scientist friend and got this graph. This correlation between GDP per capita and study permit approval rate is 0.67. This basically demonstrates that rich countries have a very high study permit approval rate for Canada, like Japan, Italy, Spain, USA, Singapore, Switzerland. And on the other hand, the closer a country is from the left side of the graph, that is the lowest GDP countries, the lower their approval rate. That's why you'll see so many underdeveloped and some developing countries with low approval rates whose GDP per capita is less than $10,000. If I clean up this graph a little bit and only show you some top and bottom countries, that's what we get. If you look at this graph now, all of the top countries, Australia, Switzerland, Singapore, they have a very high GDP. They're rich countries. Their approval rate is very high. Philippines and India, who have a lot of study permit applicants, have a study permit approval rate of about 64% in that region. Pakistan is at 33% approval rate, which means that only 1 out of 3 study permit applications will be approved for Pakistan or were approved for Pakistan. And a lot of African countries have a very, very low approval rate, and their GDP per capita is also very low. So since there is a clear correlation here, what comes to your mind when you see this? It seems that poor countries have their study permits refused more often. But you might challenge this and say that study permit approval should depend on the individual and not their country. And you'd be right. This data shows an overall trend. For example, it's safe to say that Canadian study permit applicants from Cameroon might have a lower income than study permit applicants from Japan, Switzerland, or Singapore, at least in general. But let's test this theory with more data. This is the chart which summarizes all of the study permit refusal reasons for African nations for 2021. This data has been pulled from tens of thousands of study permit refusals from African nations. So if you combine the financial assets, tuition fee, current employment, and country of residence employment, if we sum these up into one category, let's call it funds or money, it shows that almost 40% of the refusals were related to funds. And this is again for Africa. So this is the biggest contributor, especially for African countries. Purpose of study, travel history, family ties are also among the top reasons. But that is the topic for another video. By the way, tap that subscribe button, turn on the notifications so you can know when I upload more videos. Coming back to this chart, you might be thinking, what in the world is R2161B that's written on the left of these refusal reasons? In case you didn't know, R refers to Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations, that is the Canadian immigration law. 2161B is the reference to the regulation, aka reference to the Canadian law about study permits. And this regulation states that an officer shall issue a study permit to a foreign national if, following an examination, it is established that the foreign national will leave Canada at the end of the period authorized for their stay. So the officers may refuse a study permit application if they think that the applicant won't go back to their country of residence and may try to stay in Canada illegally, for example by making a fraudulent refugee claim, by doing unauthorized work, or just going under the radar and disappearing. Why? Because of the reasons shown in the pie chart, and the visa officer's suspicions are sometimes correct too. Here's a list of top 20 applicants making refugee claims in Canada. This is not a percentage. So as you can see, applicants from some countries have made a lot of refugee claims in Canada. That's why the visa officers become a bit more suspicious, cautious. So when someone from an underdeveloped country applies for a study permit, the officer may already be looking at the application very cautiously. On top of that, if you've not shown a solid proof of funds, your chances get even lower. So what can you do? There are many things that you can do, but for the scope of this video, one high impact action that you should take is to demonstrate as much financial strength as you can. Another RCIC or licensed immigration consultant recently contacted me for some advice where they were approached by a client who had an annual family income of $300,000. But they didn't demonstrate that proof in their parent super visa application. They didn't use any of that. And the application was refused due to financial reasons. So show a strong bank statement of 6 months. If you or your parents who are sponsoring your study in Canada have funds elsewhere, for example in stocks, in bonds, other fixed deposits, utilize that. Show proof that those funds belong to you or your parents and you have access to them. If you have any real property, for example a house, a plot, a commercial property, get it valuated by a professional and attach that proof. If you're currently working, attach your salary slips and employment letter. And don't take a loan from someone just to show a high bank statement, as number one, it's ethically wrong. And number two, if your income is low but the bank statement is high, that might cause suspicion that you're artificially trying to inflate your bank statement. If there's nothing you can do on the financial side, other elements of your application should be very strong to give you a fighting chance of success. For more inside tips, join my mailing list. I'll put a link in the description or send me an email info@pcici.ca and I'll add you to that insiders list. That's it for this video. As you might have noticed in the previous video, later this year I'm going to be launching a community for all of us that want to visit, study, work or immigrate to Canada, or even those who are already here but they want to invite their family and friends to come over, who might be looking to network, to find a good job. The goal is to have us all in one community where we can support each other, but have those who want to have some fun but are very serious about their goals as well. So there will be an application process to join this community. If you're interested, I'll leave a link in the description. Thank you so much.